At Boston University's annual Business Innovation Showcase, I discovered what betrayal truly feels like. My own project partner deceived me, but he had no idea that his betrayal would end up destroying his entire career. Hi, my name is Lauren Bennett, and I'm 23 years old. I study business management at Boston University, one of the most competitive and inspiring places I've ever known. When I first arrived here, I didn't have much. Just a suitcase full of clothes, a secondhand laptop, and a head full of dreams that sometimes felt too big for someone like me. I come from a small town in Vermont, where winters are long and quiet, and life moves at a slow, predictable rhythm. Boston, on the other hand, is alive in every sense. The noise, the people, the lights, it all reminds me that the world is much bigger than what I once believed. I'm here on a scholarship, something I earned after years of sleepless nights, part-time jobs, and countless sacrifices. My parents couldn't afford college, but they always told me that if I worked hard enough, the world would open its doors. I guess they were right. Every morning, I take the same route to campus, a 15-minute walk past the Charles River, where the breeze smells like salt and hope. Then, before my classes, I spend 2 hours working at a small cafe near campus. The place smells like roasted coffee beans and vanilla syrup, and sometimes, when the morning sun hits the glass windows, I almost forget how tired I am. I make coffee for students rushing to lectures, professors lost in thought, and strangers who barely notice my name tag. But I don't mind. Every dollar I save brings me one step closer to my dream, starting my own company one day. I don't come for money, and maybe that's what keeps me grounded. I've seen people lose themselves chasing wealth and status, but for me, success has always been about stability and peace. I love observing people who walk into the cafe. Some are loud and confident, while others seem nervous, pretending they belong. I've learned that college isn't just about grades, it's about learning who you are when no one's watching. At night, my world becomes even quieter. I share a small apartment with another scholarship student, Jenna. She's sweet, talks in her sleep, and keeps the apartment smelling like lavender. Our place isn't fancy, just 2 small rooms, a kitchen with flickering lights, and a window that overlooks the city skyline, but it's home. Sometimes, when I sit by that window, I imagine what my life will look like in 5 years. Maybe I'll be running my own business, or maybe I'll still be figuring things out. Either way, I know I'll get there. I've never been afraid of hard work. Still, even with my focus on studies, there's a part of me that longs for connection, for someone who understands the pressure of carrying everything alone. Boston can be a lonely city, especially for someone who doesn't come from privilege. You watch others buying what you can't afford, celebrating weekends you can't join, wearing brands you only see on display. But despite all that, I've built something stronger, resilience. My professors often say I have potential, but I think what I really have is persistence. I don't quit. I can't. That's not who I am. My father used to tell me, Lauren, life isn't about waiting for perfect opportunities. It's about creating them. That line stays with me every day, especially when things feel overwhelming. And maybe, deep down, I've always been waiting for that one opportunity to prove myself, to show that hard work and integrity still mean something. What I didn't know then was that my biggest opportunity was about to come disguised as a group project, a project that would change my life in ways I could never have imagined. It was supposed to be just another assignment, another chance to prove myself in front of my professors. But instead, it became the beginning of a story that would test my heart, my trust, and everything I believed about people. Looking back now, I can say this with absolute certainty. That semester didn't just teach me business strategies or teamwork. It taught me what betrayal feels like, what strength truly is, and how sometimes the people we least expect can show us who we really are.
I didn't know any of that back then.
All I knew was that I was ready to begin. The announcement came on an ordinary Tuesday morning, just as the first snow of winter started to dust the rooftops of Boston. I remember sitting in the second row of Professor Daniel's lecture hall, sipping lukewarm coffee from a paper cup, trying to keep myself awake after a long night of studying. The professor, a tall man with gray hair and a habit of pacing back and forth when he spoke, cleared his throat and said, Your final project this semester will determine 40% of your grade. You'll be working in pairs. A low murmur spread across the room, half excitement, half panic. I wasn't sure which group I belonged to. Group projects had always been a gamble. You either got lucky with someone reliable or ended up doing all the work yourself. I silently prayed for the first option. Your partners, he continued, will be assigned randomly. Of course, I thought.
No luck involved then.
He began reading out names from his clipboard, pairing one student after another. My pen tapped nervously on my notebook as I waited. Finally, I heard it. Lauren Bennett and Evan Carter. For a moment, I wasn't sure I'd heard correctly. Evan Carter. The name everyone knew. The kind of student professors loved and students admired, or envied. He was confident, effortlessly charming, and the kind of person who always seemed to have life figured out. I'd seen him around campus countless times, usually surrounded by friends, his laughter echoing through the hallways, his sleeves rolled up like he owned the place. And now he was my project partner. My first instinct was panic. People like Evan didn't notice people like me. I wasn't part of the popular crowd, didn't attend frat parties, didn't drive a shiny car, and definitely didn't wear designer coats in the middle of winter. I was just me. Simple, invisible Lauren. After class ended, I started packing my things when I heard a voice behind me. "So, looks like we're partners," he said. I turned, and there he was, tall, with dark brown hair, a confident smile, and the kind of presence that filled the space around him. He reached out his hand. "Evan Carter," he said. "But I guess you already knew that." I laughed awkwardly. "Lauren Bennett," I replied, shaking his hand. "And yes, I might have heard your name once or twice." "Good," he said with a grin. "Then we're off to a great start." His easy charm caught me off guard. Most people like him had an air of arrogance, but Evan didn't. At least not in that moment. He suggested we meet later that afternoon in the library to start brainstorming ideas for the project. I agreed, trying not to sound too eager. The rest of the day passed in a blur. When I arrived at the library, he was already there, headphones around his neck, laptop open, a half-empty iced coffee beside him. He waved me over.
"Hey, Bennett.
"Hope you're ready to build something big." "Depends," I said, sitting down across from him. "Are we thinking big as in realistic big or crazy startup idea big?" He leaned back, smiling. "Why not both?" We started tossing ideas back and forth, and, to my surprise, he actually listened. He didn't interrupt or dismiss my thoughts. Every time I hesitated, he'd encourage me with, "Go on," or "That's smart, keep going." Slowly, my nerves started to fade. For the first time in a long while, I felt seen, not as the quiet scholarship girl, but as someone with real ideas worth hearing. By the time we packed up that night, we had sketched out the foundation for our project, a student-based business app that could connect college students with part-time work opportunities around campus. He called it Campus Cart. I remember how his eyes lit up when I said, "That could actually work." "Then it settled," he said, smiling as we walked out into the cold night air. "Campus Cart it is. And, Lauren, I think we're going to make a great team." I smiled back, feeling something I hadn't felt in months, excitement. Maybe, just maybe, I had gotten lucky this time. The weeks that followed were unlike any I had ever experienced. Every day seemed to begin and end with Evan. Our project meetings in the library became a routine I looked forward to, something that added warmth to the gray chill of Boston's winter. What started as academic discussions soon turned into long conversations about life, dreams, and everything in between. We'd meet after our classes, settle at our usual spot near the big window overlooking the courtyard, and spend hours bouncing ideas off each other. Sometimes he'd bring coffee for both of us, always the same order. Black for him, vanilla latte for me. "You're predictable," he'd tease. I'd roll my eyes and reply, "At least I'm consistent." He'd laugh, that easy, confident laugh of his that made everything else around me fade. One evening, as the snow fell softly outside, we were finalizing a section of our presentation when the power briefly flickered. The library lights dimmed, and I remember the faint glow from his laptop reflecting in his eyes. "You know," he said, leaning back in his chair. "You're not like anyone I've worked with before. You actually care about getting things right." I smiled. "That's what happens when your scholarship depends on it." He looked at me for a moment, his expression softening. "You work harder than anyone I know." It was such a simple compliment, yet it stayed with me. Maybe it was because he said it like he meant it. Over time, our meetings started lasting longer than necessary. Even after we finished discussing the project, neither of us seemed in a hurry to leave. Sometimes we'd sit in silence, listening to the faint hum of the heaters, pretending to study while secretly watching each other over the rims of our coffee cups. He'd tell me about his family, his father, a corporate lawyer who was rarely home, and his mother, who hosted charity events but never seemed truly happy. I told him about my small-town upbringing, my parents' sacrifices, and how I promised myself I'd make their hard work worth it. One night, while walking back from the library, he said quietly, "You know, you're different, Lauren. Most people I know talk about success like it's a race. You talk about it like it's something you want to earn." I didn't know how to respond. Compliments like that were rare for me, and coming from Evan, they felt even heavier. That night, lying in bed, I caught myself replaying his words over and over, wondering if he truly meant them. Our bond deepened with every passing day. We'd grab lunch together between lectures, share study notes, and text late into the night. His messages were always light and funny, little things that made me smile after long shifts at the cafe. "You're the only reason I haven't dropped this class," he once texted, followed by a winking emoji. I laughed at the screen, not realizing then how easily I was falling for him. During one of our late-night study sessions, he suggested we take a walk to clear our heads. The air was freezing, but he insisted. We ended up by the Charles River, the city lights reflecting on the still water. He shoved his hands into his coat pockets and said, "When this project is over, I want to start something real with you." For a moment, the world stood still. I stared at him, my heart thudding so loud I could almost hear it. "You mean like a company?" I asked, pretending not to notice the softness in his tone. He smiled, that same half-grin that always made me nervous. "Maybe. Or maybe something better." The silence between us stretched, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was full, charged with something unspoken. When I looked up, the snow was falling again, tiny flakes landing on his hair. He brushed one off and said, "You deserve everything you're working for, Lauren. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise." That night, when I got home, I couldn't stop smiling. My roommate Jenna noticed immediately. "You've got that look," she teased. "What look?" I asked, pretending to be clueless. Someone just made me blush for the first time in months look." I threw a pillow at her, but she wasn't wrong. Something had changed. Evan wasn't just my project partner anymore. He had become my favorite part of every day. When I woke up, I thought about him. When I walked past the cafe where we first met, I half expected to see him waiting. It was strange and wonderful, like being part of a story I didn't know I'd started writing. By the time midterms ended, we were spending almost all our free time together. He'd pick me up after my cafe shifts, claiming it was too cold for me to walk home alone. Sometimes we'd just sit in his car, music playing softly, talking about everything and nothing at all. And for the first time since coming to Boston, I felt like I truly belonged, not because of my grades or hard work, but because someone saw me. Someone chose me. Looking back now, I realize how naive I was to think that kind of connection could last forever. But at that moment, under Boston's winter sky, I believed every word he said. I believed in him. It happened gradually, like the slow fading of a song you love. One week, everything felt perfect: late-night texts, study sessions that turned into laughter, and coffee dates that stretched longer than planned. But then, little by little, something started to change. Evan became harder to reach. His replies grew shorter, colder. "Busy day," he'd text. "Talk later." Only later never came. At first, I told myself it was just the pressure of finals. Everyone was stressed. Maybe he just needed space. But deep down, I knew something had shifted. The warmth in his voice was gone, replaced by polite distance. Our project meetings, once filled with excitement, became mechanical. We sat across from each other in the library, exchanging small talk that felt forced. The easy comfort between us was replaced by silence that hung too heavy to ignore. One evening, I asked if he wanted to grab dinner after class, something we used to do without even thinking. He smiled faintly and said, "Can't tonight." "Got plans?" "With who?" asked, trying to sound casual. "Just a friend," he replied, eyes already back on his phone. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But his tone didn't match the words. Over the next few days, I noticed things I had somehow missed before. The way he'd quickly lock his phone screen when I looked over, the secretive smiles that appeared when new messages came through, the hushed phone calls where he'd step out of the room. My stomach twisted every time, but I kept pretending everything was fine. I didn't want to be that girl, the insecure one, the jealous one. Still, it hurt watching him slip away inch by inch and not knowing why. The final straw came one Friday afternoon. I had just finished my cafe shift when I saw Evan sitting outside the student center patio with someone. At first, I couldn't tell who it was. But as I got closer, my chest tightened. It was Tessa Morgan, the same Tessa everyone knew. Her family donated to half the buildings on campus. She was beautiful, confident, the kind of girl who didn't need to try. And there was Evan, leaning forward, laughing in that familiar way he used to with me. I froze. He hadn't seen me yet. They were sitting close, too close. She reached over and fixed his collar, and he didn't move away. My heart sank. I turned around quickly before either of them noticed me. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them together. The next day, I confronted him. "I saw you with Tessa yesterday," I said, keeping my voice calm even though my hands were shaking. He blinked, surprised, then laughed lightly. "Oh, that? She's just helping me polish our presentation. She's got a great eye for design." "Since when?" I asked quietly. "Since now," he said, shrugging. "Relax, Lauren. Don't overthink it." His casual tone felt like a slap. He looked at me like I was overreacting, like I was imagining things that weren't there. "I'm not overthinking," I said, trying to hold his gaze. "You've been distant, and now you're suddenly spending time with her. What am I supposed to think?" He sighed. "You're supposed to trust me." That was the moment something inside me cracked. I wanted to trust him, but his eyes didn't hold the same sincerity they once did. He'd learned how to say all the right things, but the truth was in what he didn't say. Over the following days, I tried to focus on the project, pushing my doubts aside. But the connection we once had felt hollow now. When he smiled, it didn't reach his eyes. When he complimented my work, it sounded rehearsed. I caught him whispering on calls again, slipping out of meetings, disappearing without explanation. My heart kept waiting for him to come back. The Evan I knew, the one who made me believe in partnership. But he didn't. That version of him was gone. I started noticing the smallest details, how he suddenly dressed better, how he talked about future investors, and how he avoided sharing progress files with me. It didn't take a genius to see where this was heading. Something was happening behind my back. I just didn't know what yet. And even though a part of me was already breaking, another part whispered, "Don't say anything. Watch. Wait." Because deep down, I had a feeling that this shift wasn't just about love, it was about betrayal. 2 days before our final presentation, the city was wrapped in a thin veil of snow. Boston looked beautiful that morning. White rooftops, frosty trees, and streets gleaming under the pale winter sun. But I barely noticed. My mind was consumed with our project. Evan hadn't answered my last 3 texts, and I was starting to worry. We had data left to finalize, slides to review, and only 48 hours before submission. I decided to stop by his apartment that afternoon, thinking maybe we could finish everything together. It wasn't unusual. I'd been there before, and we often worked late while his roommate was out. Still, something about that day felt different, though I couldn't explain why. When I arrived, the door was unlocked. I hesitated, then knocked lightly, and stepped inside. "Evan." I called out, but there was no response. His place was quiet, too quiet, except for the faint hum of his laptop on the kitchen table. He must have stepped out for a bit, I thought. Maybe for coffee. I dropped my bag near the couch and moved closer to the table, glancing at the laptop screen. At first, I only meant to check if he had updated the slides, but what I saw made my heart stop. The subject line of the open email read, "Campus Cart Launch. Investors approved." For a moment, my brain refused to process it. I scrolled down, my fingers trembling. There it was, an entire email thread between Evan and a group of local investors. He was thanking them for supporting his and Tessa Morgan's startup, describing how their vision for Campus Cart had impressed the panel. My breath caught. His and Tessa's startup? My hands grew cold. My eyes darted across the attachments. Our pitch deck, the same one I had designed, same color scheme, same logo I'd created on Canva late one night when he said, "You're the creative one, Lauren. Make it yours." And I had. Only now, yours had turned into his. Every file had been renamed, no trace of my name, no mention of my contribution. It was like I had never existed. My throat tightened as I opened another document, an investor brief. It was signed, Evan Carter, co-founder and CEO. And below, Tessa Morgan, co-founder and marketing director. I stared at those names until they blurred. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I sank into the chair, shaking. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. How could he do this? The hours we spent building that idea, the nights I stayed awake perfecting slides, the research, the business plan, it was all mine. Every bit of it. He had taken everything. I wanted to stop looking, but I couldn't. It was like watching an accident in slow motion. You know it's painful, but you can't look away. I found voice recordings attached to one of the emails. He had recorded parts of our practice sessions. I clicked one. His voice echoed through the room. "Lauren's useful. She's focused, detail-oriented. Exactly what I need to polish the concept." Useful. That word hit me like a punch. I stopped the audio immediately, but it was too late. The damage was done. The betrayal was complete. My stomach churned. I pushed away from the table, stumbling toward the door. I needed air. I needed space to think. Outside, the cold slapped my face, but I barely felt it. The streets were quiet except for the crunch of snow under my boots. The wind stung my eyes, or maybe it was the tears I was holding back. I walked aimlessly for blocks, passing strangers whose faces blurred together. Every step felt heavier than the last. I ended up by the Charles River, the same place where Evan once told me he wanted to start something real with me. I laughed bitterly through tears.
Real.
Nothing about him had been real. Everything, his smiles, his compliments, his late-night talks, had been a setup. I sank onto a bench, my breath fogging in the cold air. My mind replayed everything. His sudden distance, his secrecy, the new clothes, the calls he took outside. The pieces fit together now, forming a picture I wished I'd never seen. He'd been working with Tessa all along. Maybe that cafe scene hadn't been business after all. Maybe it had been the start of his next betrayal. I sat there for what felt like hours, trying to calm my racing heart. A part of me wanted to scream, to go to his apartment and confront him face to face. But another part, colder, quieter, whispered, "Don't waste your words. Use them where they'll matter." I walked back home in silence. Jenna wasn't there, thank God. I collapsed on my bed, staring at the ceiling as my tears finally spilled over. I thought about all the times he told me I was different, that I deserved everything I was working for. I wanted to laugh at my own stupidity. I had believed him. Every word, every lie. I reached for my phone and scrolled through our old messages. There were hundreds. Late-night jokes, inside references, sweet promises. Now, each one felt poisonous. I deleted them all one by one until there was nothing left. The next morning, when I looked in the mirror, something inside me had changed. The girl who believed in him, who believed in trust and teamwork, was gone. In her place stood someone quieter, sharper, and stronger. I didn't cry again. Not that day, not after. Because I realized something important. He had taken my idea, but he hadn't taken my proof. Every document, every chat log, every file timestamp still existed because I had saved copies, out of habit. And suddenly, I knew what I had to do. This wasn't going to end with tears. It was going to end with justice. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and whispered to myself, "You picked the wrong girl to betray, Evan." The next morning, sunlight streamed through my window, spilling across the floor like it didn't care that my world had collapsed the night before. I sat on the edge of my bed, holding a cold cup of coffee I couldn't bring myself to drink. My reflection in the window looked different, tired, yes, but not broken. There was anger behind my eyes now, calm and sharp, like fire trapped inside glass. For the first time since everything happened, I didn't feel weak. I felt aware. Evan had taken my idea, my trust, and twisted both into his personal victory. But he'd made one mistake. He underestimated the girl who built that idea from scratch. I had always kept backups of every file, every version of the project, and every email that showed who did the real work. I opened my laptop, my fingers trembling slightly, and began organizing everything. The original drafts, time-stamped PowerPoint slides, notes with my initials in the corner, messages where he said, "You handle the research. I'll do the talking." Each piece of evidence was a fragment of truth, and together they told the real story. By the time I finished, I had built an entire digital case, undeniable proof that Campus Cart was mine. But I knew simply exposing him wasn't enough. I wanted him to face it publicly, the same way he'd stolen it publicly. If he'd chosen to betray me in front of the world, I would choose to destroy his illusion in front of the same world. Still, I couldn't do it alone. That's when I thought of her, Tessa. I hesitated for hours before messaging her. My fingers hovered above the keyboard as I typed, "You deserve to know the truth about Evan." I attached 3 screenshots. Emails between Evan and investors, our shared files showing my authorship, and a snippet of his recorded comment calling me useful. I didn't expect her to respond, but she did, just 15 minutes later. Her message was short. "Can we meet?" We met at the campus cafe later that afternoon, the same place where I had once seen them laughing together. This time, she was alone. She looked composed, but her hands trembled when she held her cup. "I didn't believe it at first," she said quietly. "I thought you were just jealous." I nodded slowly. I would have thought the same. She looked down, her voice cracking slightly. "He told me I was special, that we were going to build something together." I smiled sadly. He told me the same thing. For a long moment, we just sat there, the silence heavy but understanding. Then I showed her the files, everything I had collected. She scrolled through them in disbelief, covering her mouth with one hand. "He used us both," she whispered. "Completely." "Yes," I said. "But now we get to decide how this ends." She looked up, eyes narrowing. "What do you have in mind?" That's when I told her my plan. The university's annual Business Innovation Showcase was in 2 days, the same event where Evan would be presenting Campus Cart as his original startup. Dozens of professors, students, and local investors would be there. It was the perfect stage. "You're going to let him finish his presentation," I said. "Then you'll confront him in front of everyone. And when he denies it, you'll walk in," she finished for me, "with proof." I nodded. For the first time since we'd met, she smiled. "Let's do it." That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I rehearsed every step in my mind. The moment he'd look up and see me walking through the doors, the silence that would follow, the truth finally crashing down around him. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming what was mine, about showing everyone, including myself, that I wasn't someone who stayed silent when wronged. When morning came, I stood in front of the mirror again. This time, I didn't see the girl who had been betrayed. I saw someone ready to fight back. I tied my hair neatly, put on my black blazer, and whispered to my reflection, "You're done crying, Lauren. It's time to make him remember your name." Then I picked up my laptop, the one that held all my evidence, and stepped out into the cold Boston air. The same streets that had witnessed my heartbreak were now about to witness my reckoning. The morning of the showcase felt colder than usual, though the sun was bright and sharp against the glass buildings of the Boston University campus. I arrived early, my laptop bag slung over my shoulder, my heartbeat steady but fast, like a drumline I couldn't turn off. The annual Business Innovation Showcase was the biggest event of the year, the kind that drew professors, investors, and reporters who wanted to spot the next great entrepreneur. It was supposed to be Evan's moment of glory. Instead, it would become his downfall. The auditorium was already filling when I slipped inside. Rows of chairs gleamed under white lights, and the university banner stretched proudly across the stage. Students in suits whispered rehearsed lines to themselves, their faces tense with nerves and ambition. I took a seat near the back, where no one would notice me yet. My plan was simple: let him dig his own grave. When his lies reached their peak, I'd walk in and show everyone the truth. My hands were cold as I opened my laptop, checking once again that every file was ready: the emails, the timestamps, the screenshots, the recordings. Everything was in place. Across the room, I spotted Tessa standing near the front row. She wore a deep blue blazer, her posture flawless, her expression unreadable. She didn't look at me, but I caught the faintest nod, our silent confirmation. It was time. The event began with applause as the dean gave his usual speech about innovation and integrity. The word integrity made me almost laugh under my breath. If only they knew. Several teams presented before Evan's turn came. My heart pounded louder with each passing minute. When they finally called his name. Next, we have Evan Carter presenting his project, Campus Cart. The audience erupted in polite applause. I froze for a second, watching him walk up to the stage like he owned it. Confident, smiling, tailored suit, perfect posture. He was every inch the golden boy everyone believed him to be. For a moment, I saw the version of him I used to love, the one who said he admired my determination, who called me his partner. But now I could see the act beneath the charm. He stood in the spotlight, his voice smooth and commanding as he began his pitch. Campus Cart, he said, is a revolutionary platform designed to connect students with part-time work opportunities across local businesses. The idea was born right here on campus. I nearly laughed at that. Born right here, he said, like I hadn't spent weeks building that exact sentence into our presentation script. I could feel my jaw tightening as the audience nodded, impressed by every stolen word. We believe this app will not only help students earn but empower them to manage their academic and professional lives seamlessly, he continued, gesturing toward the slides I had designed down to the color palette and font choice. My work, my effort, my dream. And here he was, standing beneath the logo I created, using it to build his reputation. Tessa watched him carefully, her face still calm, but her eyes cold. She knew her cue. I saw her inhale slowly, steadying herself. Evan moved to the final slide, a photo of him shaking hands with investors, the caption reading, "The future starts with us." The room broke into applause and he smiled, soaking in every second. The moment was perfect, and that was exactly when Tessa stood up. "Tell them, Evan," she said, her voice clear, ringing across the hall. The applause died instantly. "Tell them whose idea you really stole." A wave of murmurs swept through the audience. Evan blinked, clearly thrown off. "What are you talking about?" he said, laughing lightly, though his voice trembled just enough to betray him. "Sit down, Tessa. Don't make a scene." But she didn't. She took a step forward. "You told me this was our idea," she said, louder now. "But I've seen the files. I know who actually built it." The crowd stirred again. The dean shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Evan's smile faltered. "You're mistaken," he said quickly. "Someone must have," and that's when the auditorium doors opened behind him. Every head turned toward the sound of my footsteps echoing against the polished floor. My heart didn't race this time. It was calm, deliberate, almost peaceful. I walked down the aisle slowly, laptop in hand, as dozens of eyes followed me. Evan's face drained of color when he saw me. For a moment, the entire room fell silent. The only thing louder than that silence was the truth, and it was finally about to speak. The silence in the auditorium was suffocating as I walked toward the stage, each step echoing through the hall like a countdown. My heels clicked against the polished floor, steady and deliberate, but inside, my pulse was pounding. Evan froze mid-sentence, his confidence cracking like thin glass. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The audience watched, confused and curious, their heads turning back and forth as though they'd just realized they were witnessing something far bigger than a college showcase. I stopped at the edge of the stage, facing him. "Go on," I said softly, my voice carrying through the microphone he had left open. "You were telling them about your great idea."
Don't let me stop you.
A few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd, but they died quickly. Evan forced a smile, his jaw tight. "Lauren," he said, pretending surprise, "what are you doing here?" "Watching," I replied calmly. "After all, this is my project too, isn't it?" The color drained from his face. He glanced toward the judges' table, then at Tessa, who was standing now, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," he began, his voice cracking slightly. "Lauren helped with some research, that's all." I tilted my head, smiling faintly. "Just research?" Funny, because I seem to remember writing every slide, designing that logo, and developing the business model you're presenting right now. The audience erupted in whispers. The dean leaned forward, frowning. Evan ran a hand through his hair, his charm faltering. "This isn't the place for her." "Oh, I think it's exactly the place," Tessa interrupted, her voice sharp as glass. "You lied to me, Evan. You said this idea was yours, that you created it. But she is proof. I've seen it." Evan turned toward her, his voice rising. "You don't know what you're talking about." I opened my laptop, projecting the screen onto the large display behind us. "Actually," I said, "she does." The screen lit up with a series of files, neatly organized into folders labeled original drafts, emails, meeting notes, proof of authorship. Gasps filled the room. I clicked open one of the emails, the same one I had found in his apartment. The subject line glowed under the projector light. "Campus cart launch. Investors approved." "This," I said clearly, "was sent by Evan Carter to a group of investors 3 weeks ago. The attachments are copies of our project files, identical to the ones I created. He simply changed the author name, removed my initials, and replaced them with his own." I clicked to the next slide, screenshots of our chat logs. Here's where he says, "You handle the research and the business plan, I'll handle the presentation." And here, I scrolled down, revealing another message. He tells me, "Don't worry about investors, I'll take care of that part." Apparently, what he meant was, "I'll take care of stealing your work and pretending it's mine." The audience was dead silent now, every eye locked on Evan. The confidence that once defined him was gone, replaced by panic. "Lauren, please," he said, his voice breaking. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly." I cut in, my voice steady. "You saw someone who worked hard and thought you could use her. You thought no one would believe the quiet girl who can't afford designer suits or donor connections. You thought you'd get away with it." He opened his mouth to argue, but I wasn't finished. "You told me once that success is about who dares to take risks," I continued. "But stealing isn't a risk, Evan. It's cowardice." I clicked on one final file, a short voice note. His voice played through the auditorium speakers, echoing loud and clear. "Lauren's useful. She's focused, detail-oriented. Exactly what I need to polish the concept." The sound of his own words seemed to shatter whatever mask he had left. The judges exchanged uneasy glances. The dean whispered something to an assistant. And then the quiet broke. A single gasp came from somewhere in the front row, followed by murmurs spreading through the room like wildfire. "This can't be real," someone said under their breath. Evan's hands shook as he tried to speak. "That was taken out of context," he shouted, his voice desperate now. "You're twisting everything." "No," I said, stepping closer. "I'm simply showing what you did. You lied, manipulated, and used people to climb higher. But today, you've reached your ceiling." He turned to Tessa, as if searching for help, but she only looked at him with disgust. "You told me she was just helping you," she said coldly. "You're pathetic, Evan." And before anyone could react, she raised her hand and slapped him across the face, hard enough that the sound echoed through the hall. Gasps filled the room. He stood frozen, his cheek reddening. I walked closer, my heels clicking against the stage floor. For a second, I just looked at him, Not with anger anymore, but with something heavier. Disappointment. This, I said quietly, is for every woman who trusted the wrong man. And I slapped him too. The entire hall fell silent again, the kind of silence that vibrates through your bones. He stared at me, speechless, his mask completely shattered. I closed my laptop, tucked it under my arm, and turned to the audience. Integrity, I said, my voice steady, isn't something you fake until you make it. It's something you keep, even when it costs you. Then I walked off the stage, the crowd parting as I passed. Behind me, I could hear whispers, murmurs, the sound of everything he had built crumbling. As I stepped outside into the cold Boston air, I finally exhaled. The wind bit at my skin, but it felt clean, sharp, and honest, like the truth. The days after the showcase felt strangely quiet, like the calm that follows a storm. News of what happened spread across campus faster than I could have imagined. By the next morning, social media was flooded with clips of the confrontation. Someone had filmed the entire scene, Evan's fake charm, Tessa's outburst, and the moment I walked in with the evidence. The video was everywhere. At first, I tried to ignore it, but every time I opened my phone, there it was. Business student exposes partner for stealing startup idea. My name was trending in student groups. People I'd never met stopped me in the hallway to say they admired what I did. Professors congratulated me for standing up for myself, and the dean even called me to his office personally. "Lauren," he said, folding his hands over his desk, "I've reviewed the evidence you provided. What Mr. Carter did constitutes academic misconduct and intellectual theft. He's been suspended effective immediately." I sat there, letting the words sink in. It wasn't joy I felt, just a deep, steady sense of justice. And, he added, the investors he contacted have been informed. They've withdrawn their interest. We're offering you the chance to present your original project next semester at the National Business Conference in New York. You deserve that spotlight. My eyes stung, but I didn't cry. Not out of sadness, but out of something lighter, relief. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe freely. As I left his office, I passed a few students whispering in the hall. Normally, I would have ducked my head and walked faster, but this time I didn't. I lifted my chin and kept walking. I hadn't just cleared my name, I had reclaimed my voice. Later that week, Tessa found me sitting by the campus fountain. She looked tired but peaceful, the way people look when they've finally accepted the truth. "You know," she said, sitting beside me, "I watched that video again. The part where you said integrity isn't something you fake until you make it, that hit me." I smiled faintly. Guess I was speaking to both of us. She nodded. "You turned pain into power, Lauren. Not many people can do that." I looked at her, and for the first time, there was no resentment, just quiet understanding. We had both been deceived by the same man, but instead of letting that define us, we had written a different ending. "You know what the best part is?" I said softly. He thought he could erase me. Instead, I became the reason everyone finally saw who he really was. She laughed lightly. I'd call that poetic justice. After that day, I spent more time alone by choice. My classes felt different now. The same campus that once felt heavy with competition now felt open, full of possibility. I still worked at the cafe in the mornings, but people recognized me now. They'd say things like, "You're that girl from the showcase, right? The one who stood up for herself." And I'd smile, not out of pride, but because it reminded me how far I'd come. The betrayal had cut deep, but it also carved out a new version of me, stronger, clearer, unafraid to fight for what's mine. Every scar it left had turned into proof of resilience. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, I walked past the same auditorium where everything had happened. The doors were locked, the lights off, but just seeing it made me smile. That room had seen my worst moment, and my best. I stood there for a long minute, then whispered quietly to myself, "You did it." And for the first time since meeting Evan Carter, those words didn't sound like hope. They sounded like peace. 3 months later, spring arrived in Boston, melting away the last traces of winter's bitterness. The trees along Commonwealth Avenue bloomed with soft pink flowers, and the city that once reminded me of pain now felt alive again, a place of second chances. I had graduated a week earlier, my scholarship completed, my record spotless, and my name no longer whispered with pity, but spoken with respect. Every step I took now carried a quiet confidence, the kind that only comes after you've walked through fire and learned to survive the heat. That morning, I sat at my small apartment desk, the same one where I had once cried over sleepless nights and broken trust. But this time, the papers spread across it weren't assignments or presentation drafts. They were legal documents. I smiled as I read the bold heading at the top. Certificate of Business Registration, Bennett Solutions, LLC. My own company. My own beginning. I traced my name with my fingertip like it was a promise. After the showcase, I had spent weeks rebuilding my project from scratch. Not as campus cart, but as something better, something entirely mine. I reimagined the app to focus on connecting students with verified local jobs while offering mentorship from small business owners. It wasn't just a platform anymore, it was a purpose. I wanted other students like me, those who came from nowhere, who juggled work and study, who dreamed quietly, to have the opportunities one once struggled for. And now, thanks to the exposure that day, real investors had reached out, not because of Evan, but because of me. The memory of that showcase still lingered in small ways. Sometimes, when I opened my laptop, I'd think of the look on his face when the truth came out, that exact moment when arrogance turned into fear. I didn't hate him anymore. I didn't need to. His punishment had already arrived the moment everyone saw who he really was. I'd heard he transferred to another university, trying to start over somewhere else. Maybe he would learn something from it. Or maybe he wouldn't. Either way, his story was no longer mine to carry. Jenna walked into the room, holding 2 cups of coffee, her usual messy bun bouncing as she smiled. "You're officially a CEO now, huh?" she teased, setting a cup beside me. "Feels weird, doesn't it?" I laughed softly. Weird but right. Like this is where I was always meant to end up. I just didn't realize the path would be so hard to get here. She grinned. "You earned it, Lauren. Every bit of it." After she left, I opened my journal, the one I'd started when I first came to Boston, and flipped to a blank page. I wrote the same words my father once told me before I left home. Life isn't about waiting for perfect opportunities, it's about creating them. For the first time, I understood what that truly meant. Later that afternoon, I took a walk along the Charles River. The air was warm, the water calm, and the city's skyline shimmered like a reflection of everything I had survived. Across the bridge, I saw students laughing, carrying books, running to class, the same life I once lived. It felt strange to realize that chapter was over, but I wasn't sad. I had learned more from pain than I ever did from lectures. I stopped at the same bench where I had once cried, broken and lost after discovering Evan's betrayal. The wood was cold under my hand, but I smiled as I sat down, whispering, "Thank you." Because if that heartbreak hadn't happened, I might never have found this version of myself, the one who didn't wait for validation, the one who created her own path. As the sun dipped low over the water, I thought about everything that had changed. I wasn't the quiet, invisible girl anymore. I was the woman who stood her ground, who spoke her truth, who refused to let betrayal define her. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone, not anymore. I took out my phone, opened the website of my new company, and smiled at the tagline I'd written below my name. Built with honesty. Powered by resilience. The golden light of sunset reflected off the screen, and in that glow, I saw the future waiting. Not perfect, but mine. I whispered one last line to myself, softly but proudly. I gave you trust, and you gave me a lesson. Now, my name isn't tied to your success. It's written on the ruins of your betrayal. And with that, I stood up, walking away from the river, ready to begin again. If you like my story, don't forget to subscribe to Revenge Wave, and tell me, where are you watching from, and what time is it there right now?